All right, so we're back with the third lesson, which is all about what's next, intro to selection. So give yourself a minute to pause and think of your favorite app or website. What makes it your favorite? Is it a game that you play? Is it an app that you use to shop? Or is it your favorite streaming service? So last time we learned sequencing, which is the most important thing you need when developing any algorithm. So sequencing is following a set of events, one, two, three. Think of it like a recipe. So now we're going to learn about selection, which is the next step in developing an algorithm. But what is selection? Selection is the processing of inputs to make a decision. So clicking a button and then an output being made based on your difference in input. So quizzes, shopping websites, and more use selection to basically run the basic parts of the website. And selection is based off of if or else statements, which we're going to learn today. So basically, if else statements state if this condition is true, do this, else do this. So these are also often referred to as conditionals. So let's put it to the test and get into today's project. So let's start by making something. What's a question we all know is true? So let's start thinking about that and go back to our theme. So today I'll go for the peachy theme. So what I want to do for today's project is make a project all based on a question that has an obvious true or false answer. So, is it, do you like coding? Is my question. So to make the font size bigger, you could feel free to skip ahead the design part and design as you feel. Um, make it look nice. Is your computer? So again, feel free. We've been doing this design for a bit now. If you want to um, move on to something different. So what today's app is going to essentially do is I'm just making a basic design. So remember to always rename the icons you're using if you're going to use them to interact with your program, just for ease of coding. So we're going to use radio buttons, which is something we haven't used previously, but these are basically what you use in every online quiz. We're not going to use checkboxes because there's no point in sort of checking, multi-selecting on a true or false question. So this one is going to be true, and this we don't need to rename because we're not working with it directly. And then the size got mixed up again. So once we know what's true, it's not working out for me for a second. Okay. So once we know what's true, we're going to obviously add a label for false, and we're going to get right into the coding. So as you're finishing up your design portion, give yourself a second to think about what some of the more important parts are in a true or false. Like, how are we going to tell the computer what to do? So here's what is going to happen. So we need to rename this one to true and this one to false. So basically the logic we're going to use here is we're going to do on event check answer. So once we hit check, so we've been doing the click for a while, we want to what? So this is where our if statements come in. So if this is true, then what do we need it to do? And if this is false, what do we need it to do? So this is actually a little bit more complicated than just your typical if-else. We have to start by defining a variable, which is not something we've done, but variables are basically small pieces of data that can be used to help process input. So we're just going to name this variable answer, or ANS, just because it's easier to type. And so by default, it's going to be set to false. So we're going to start now by making two more user input controls because we want it to know when we're clicking true and we want it to know when we're clicking false. So on event true, we want the variable answer to be set equal to true because that means we have the correct answer. And then again, we're going to use the user input control for if it's false, for clicking false. What do we need to set the variable to? I'm going to give you a second for that one. So we're going to set answer to false. But this alone isn't enough. We still need some way for the person to know that the answer they got is wrong. So what we could do is go back into design and create a display label that will say correct or incorrect. It could start by saying nothing. So we're just going to have that say checker because we know it's going to check the answer. So if the answer is true, it's usually easier to type. So if the answer is true, we want the text of checker. So we have to scroll through here and then click set text. So we're going to set the text of what? We're going to set the text of checker to correct. And let's spice this up for ourselves. I encourage you to go and add go and add a different sound effect or etc. basically to help your program be successful. So adding additional elements is really the difference maker. So now it's time to test. So we went through the code. Oh, see, I made a mistake. Again, this is super useful for code.org. So basically, we're supposed to use double equals for programming to evaluate a condition. So there you go. Usually I would go into the math section for this. Totally forgot today. Let's try again. So when we click true, we hit check, it says correct for us. So now let's try again when we hit false. Incorrect, try again. So we use this basic conditional to cut down the amount of code we would have to use and process the input. So congratulations, you officially made your first selection program. So congrats on that and stay tuned for the next part.